Disclaimer, not disclaimer. This teaching is not intended to replace studying the Torah on Shabbat. Rather, it is an extension of Torah study to learn from the sins of our forebears in the ancient past so we will understand the Torah's practical application in our own lives today. We will also regain our national identity, which is so greatly missing among us. Our true identity is not the nation of our biological birth, but with biblical Israel. And the patriotism for biblical Israel, which we so badly need, can be gained by identifying with the people and history of those ancient times. Always study the Torah of Yahweh, which is His instructions, teachings, and His law, rolled into one word, Torah. Not only on Shabbat, but every day we should meditate on His Torah, His law. Psalms 119, 105. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. Deuteronomy 5:33. You shall walk in all the ways which Yahweh your God has commanded you, that you may live, and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. Psalms 1:1 and 1:2. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand on the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in Yahweh's law, His Torah. On His law, His Torah, he meditates day and night. Psalms 119, 174. I have longed for your salvation, Yahweh. Your law, your Torah, is my delight.
You for another lesson about Gideon, and I just pray that you will be the teacher and not me, your words and not mine, and I just pray this in Yeshua's name. Okay, so this is called Gideon's legacy. Gideon is now dead. Of course, the scriptures don't tell us that, but as we do this study, it will become evident that he has died, and there is a wicked legacy about to follow through his son Abimelech. Judges 9:1. Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, that's Gideon, went to Shechem to his mother's brothers and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, so let's stop here before I go any further. Abimelech was the son of Gideon's concubine from chapter 8, verse 31. And note that Gideon had 71 sons. He had 70 sons from his wives in Ophrah, but he had one that was from his Ephraimite concubine. Now the name Abimelech means my father is king. Ab is father. E is my. Melech, so is king. So father, my king. Or in English, my father is king. Well, this is very telling about how Gideon viewed his role in Israel. The name Abimelech was either chosen by Gideon, or perhaps Gideon's son took this name for himself. Either way, it indicates that Gideon indeed thought of himself as a king of Israel, enough so that he gave Abimelech the name, or instilled in his son the idea that he really was the king of Israel, even though he had refused to be crowned by the Israelites after the war with Midian. So he said one thing with his mouth and did another with his actions. Abimelech then is acting as Gideon's successor, but it is not for an unauthorized, but it is for an unauthorized and illegitimate throne that Abimelech is trying to succeed Gideon. Because Yahweh did not authorize Israel to have a king. And for Israel's part, their offer to crown Gideon king was the first time we come to understand that the Israelites would really rather have the worldly form of government, a monarchy, than to have Yahweh's righteous form of government, judges. Israel did not want to be judged. They wanted to be ruled over so they could have someone to blame when things went wrong. And today, Yahweh's people also don't want to be judged. Abimelech went to talk with the entire household of his grandfather on his mother's side in Shechem, which is an Ephraimite city. That Abimelech's mother was from this city suggests a political arrangement between Manasseh, Gideon's tribe, and Ephraim. Remember, there had been conflict between Gideon from the tribe of Manasseh and the Ephraimites during the war against the Midianites. So it is likely this woman becoming his concubine was intended to renew the kinship ties between the two tribes and end the conflict. But unresolved conflicts have a way of going underground only to unbury themselves and show up later. And so more is needed than a mere concubine to heal jealousy between brethren. Now here is what Abimelech said to his grandfather. Please speak in the ears of all the men of Shechem. Is it better for you that all the sons of Jerubbaal, who are 70 persons, rule over you, or that one rule over you? Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. Now, Abimelech, of course, was one of the 70, but he was offering, the question, all 70 of us, or just one of us, me. Now, this likely happened very quickly after Gideon's death. When there is an expected succession of power, the recipients don't waste any time acting to get into power. And this is exactly why we know that Gideon was dead, because Abimelech was trying to succeed Gideon. Abimelech preempted any consideration of his 70 brothers before any of them could be considered for a kingship. Abimelech intended to do what his father would not. He intended to be crowned king over Israel through the lead tribe, Ephraim. Now that was a politically savvy thing to do, because Ephraim wanted to maintain its leadership. They were angry with Gideon because as a man from the tribe of Manasseh, it looked like he was usurping their leadership, right? And they were mad at that. So now Abimelech is offering them a way to keep that leadership role in Israel. There should not have been a succession of power because Israel's judges were voted on and elected in Israel. So you don't judges don't hand on to the next generation the judgeship. Judges are selected by the people. A judge, however, does not even seem to come to Abimelech's or the Ephraimites' mind in this situation. Probably because in Gideon's time, he was acting as king. So this is going to now be about succession, as if Gideon had actually been a king. Abimelech's suggestion amounted to the fact that he was the only Ephraimite of all the sons, who were probably all from Manassehite mothers. This would have been the source of rivalry between Abimelech and the 70, which would have given the Ephraimites good reason to want him as king over them. Given the ongoing rivalry between the two tribes, Ephraim was not willing to accept a Manassehite judge or king. So what you have here is pretty much an impossible situation, because even though the 71 sons could rule as judges of a great court, a great Beit Din, like the one that was eventually formed in Jerusalem, it is most likely that none of them were even qualified to judge, including Abimelech. They wouldn't have been qualified to judge according to Yahweh's law. And so none of them would likely have been elected except one, which we will meet later on. Although, the people were corrupt, maybe they would have gone ahead and elected him judge, but he did not want to be judge. He wanted to be king. These people had returned to worshiping other gods, and they were mixing worship of other gods with worship of Yahweh. So any judging done by them would have been perverted, because idolaters don't care about Yahweh's law. Any judge of Israel who was an idolater would necessarily lead Israel further away from the law. Judges 9:3. His mother's brothers, that's Abimelech's uncles, all of whom were probably there when the Ephraimites gave Gideon a hard time about his not calling them to the war against the Midianites. His uncles spoke of him in the ears of all the men of Shechem all these words, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, "He is our brother." Well, with this statement, we can see that the jealousy of the tribe of Ephraim against the tribe of Manasseh continues. Verse 4, they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal Berit, with which Abimelech hired vain and light fellows who followed him. So the house or the temple of Baal Berit was the authority which the Ephraimite men used to make covenant with Abimelech for the purpose of killing all 70 Manassehite brothers. 1 piece of silver per Manassehite brother. So making Abimelech king over Israel then was tantamount to giving Yahweh's nation to Baal. Do you see how wicked this is? This 70 pieces of silver came from the Baal temple sitting inside Shechem's city walls. These were men who worshipped Baal. Another source of the conflict, of course, earlier between Ephraim and Manasseh is that Gideon had torn down his father's Baal altar, remember? And so we want to get rid of that. We don't want any of those other 70 sons to go around doing what Gideon did, tearing down Baal altars, do we? 70 pieces of silver, the equivalent number of fully Manassehite sons of Gideon, is significant. As I said, each piece of silver was for one head of his brothers. Now consider that the concubine's sons in the law do not stand in the front of the line for succession. And consider that the other sons were from wives, not concubines. So wives' sons are looked at first for succession. Abimelech would have been number 71. See? He needed 70 pieces of silver to pay a personal army to go with him from among the Ephraimites to kill the brothers. Abimelech's army was comprised of worthless fellows, vain and spiritually shallow men who had plans for their share of the money. Abimelech and his 70 brothers, as I said, might have ruled together as a great Beit Din, 70 judges with one Nasi or prince, which would have been Abimelech. But Abimelech was not that kind of man to share authority. Verse 5, he went to his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, being 70 persons on one stone. But Yotam, the youngest son of Jerubbaal was left, for he hid himself. Abimelech got himself a little army together and went to attack his father's city. And let me tell you something. 70 men rather, aren't going to just line up to be beheaded just because somebody says they should. No, you have to take a fighting force with you. That's why we know the 70 pieces of silver bought a little army that he went with. You have to have a fighting force with you, which is what wicked would-be kings do. I mean, we can see that later on with, David's sons, two of them, and they got their little armies together, and that's how you do it. You get an army. Abimelech thought of himself as successor to his father's unauthorized and illegitimate throne, and he was going to take it. The first time the number 70 appears in Scripture is in connection with the nations that came out of the Tower of Babel in Genesis 10. Then there were 70 elders of Israel who are not allowed by Yahweh to approach Mount Sinai with Moses, symbolizing the nation's inability to approach him, Exodus 24, verses 1 and 2, without the righteousness of the Torah and the holiness of Yahweh's Spirit, which was in Moses. Abimelech's murder of his 70 brothers prophesied Satan's plan to eventually murder all of mankind, to murder all of the nations. See, this is a new kind of prophecy. Generally, our prophecies have had to do with Israel. But this one now has to do with Satan's plan to murder the nations. Thus, Abimelech became a type and shadow of the Antichrist, who will seek to kill all the family of man in the end of days. And we will see in a moment that one of Abimelech's brothers escaped, which represents the escaping remnant, the woman of Revelation 12. Ophrah was Gideon's capital city and also the location of the ephod, which snared the Israelites into image worship and the continuation of their Baal idolatry. So nothing changed in the hearts of the Israelites after the war and all during Gideon's life for 40 years. They just went back to worshiping Baal as before after Gideon, soon after he made the ephod. That's just, making an image is just giving everybody permission to go worship the images of other gods. But Jotam, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left. It said there in Judges 9:5. The killing of all the possible successors to the throne, of course I've said this already, has always been the first act of a new king. This is true throughout history. New kings kill all those with a claim to the throne, don't they? That's just the way it is. But Yahweh always has a remnant, and one of Abimelech's brothers was part of that remnant. And we often wonder just how small is that remnant? Well, Jotam was 1 out of 71. That's very small. That's 0.014%. Not much. And usually the remnant are people who walk alone, and Jotam was alone. There are very few people who walk truly with Yahweh, even though they claim to be walking with him. The Israelites were claiming that, even though they were mixing worship of other gods with worship of him. But Jotam was a true person of the remnant. He was a true worshiper of Yahweh. The other thing about the remnant is that they are often hidden. Even Elijah did not know about the 7,000 who had not bowed to Baal. The remnant must hide or they will be killed. So if you're alone in this world walking with Yahweh, be blessed because you are highly favored of Yahweh. Judges 9:6. All the men of Shechem assembled themselves together in all the house of Millo, and went and made Abimelech king by the oak of the pillar that was in Shechem. Now I'm going to spend some time on this because this is important. And here's some information on the house of Millo. There actually are two houses of Millo in Scripture. The most well-known house of Millo is the rampart built by the Jebusites prior to Jerusalem being conquered by the Israelites, by David, according to Wikipedia. It was the boundary of David's construction from which he then continued extending the city of David after capturing it from the Jebusites in 2 Samuel 5:9. The other Millo is Beit Millo. That Millo was an ancient fortification in or near Shechem. And in Judges 9:6, and in Judges 9:20, Beit Millo is mentioned 3 times because the inhabitants of this mound or tower or fortification was somehow a part of Shechem's own fortifications. So these people got together and made Abimelech king over them. The point is, we now have, for the first time in Israel's history, a king, and he's located in the city of Shechem, which made then Shechem into Israel's capital city. Now, Shechem was not supposed to become Israel's capital city because Shiloh was the capital of Israel, according to Yahweh, the true king of Israel. But now Shechem rivals Shiloh. See? Can you see how the Ephraimites keep leading Israel away from the tabernacle and away from God? I'm flabbergasted by how they have done this from the beginning. After Joshua was the last righteous Ephraimite. Well, I guess the judge Othniel was also righteous. Caleb's brother. Anyway, it becomes the reason that Judah was able to prevail and get the birthright, according to 1 Chronicles 5, verse 2. The verse itself says the birthright was always supposed to be Joseph's. But the wicked descendants lost that for him, and Judah prevailed. Let me just stop here. Reuben lost the birthright because he went into wickedness and slept with his father's concubine. And now Joseph's descendants, especially Ephraim, which are supposed to stand for Joseph and keep this birthright, has lost that for Joseph for eternity. Sons can do terrible damage to their fathers. Anyway, the oak of the pillar in verse 6 is where Joshua had put a copy of the law in Joshua 24:26. And now Abimelech has been anointed by unauthorized men as an unauthorized king over Israel. This is the usurpation of Yahweh's rule over Israel. And the anointing at the oak of the pillar was done to try and remove Yahweh from his king's office and to lend legitimacy to the change from a judgeship form of government to a monarchy. But you see, men's plans always come to nothing when Yahweh doesn't want it to be that way. And I said here next week we're going to learn what happened to Abimelech. I think we're going to learn that here if we have enough time at the end of this teaching. The money to buy Abimelech as king came from Baal-Berith, and the crown of him as king was done where the law scroll was buried. Notice that they did not actually go to Shiloh to remove Yahweh as king over Israel. And now you know what's supposed to happen when a new king comes along, right? He's supposed to go to the capital and take that throne. But that won't happen until the Antichrist comes along and sits in the temple showing himself to be God. So ultimately, Abimelech shows himself to be a coward. These cowards did their rebellion elsewhere, but where there was a Torah scroll. The idea was to relieve Yahweh of his kingship while keeping the priesthood intact for religious purposes, as if it would not matter to Yahweh that he had been removed, as long as they were still doing their bloody sacrifices, because Israel can worship Yahweh and all the other gods it wants to, right? Wrong. This is a situation that Yahweh absolutely abhors. Look, I'm reading the book of Jeremiah again right now, and I'm just amazed. Jeremiah constantly is calling Jerusalem, the princes, the king, the priests. They don't even know the Torah. They don't know the law. And, by the time you get to Ezekiel in the diaspora in Babylon, they're sticking their behinds up in the air facing Yahweh so that they can worship the sun god. I mean, this is a usurpation that will come up again in about another 500 years or so when Jeroboam had Shechem as his capital. But remember, Jeroboam wholly turned Israel away from Yahweh with 2 golden calves, one in Dan and one in Bethel. The Ephraimites have proven themselves to be wicked tribes, and are a wicked tribe. And we use that term frequently. Oh well, we're Ephraimites because we're not Judah, but we keep the Torah, and so Deuteronomy 30 says if when we return and we keep the Torah, and so we want to label ourselves. And I have done this. Well, I'm part of the Ephraimites, the house of Ephraim, the house of Joseph. And I'm going to tell you something. The Jews don't want Ephraim back. They don't want Ephraim back. I have been told this. A friend asked a rabbi, when will the Jews let Ephraim come home? And they said, we're not going to let Ephraim come home. That'll never happen. Well, you now know why. And by the time we get to the book of Samuel, the whole tabernacle at Shiloh will have been lost. Yahweh will move his capital from Shiloh to Jerusalem eventually. That's why I can't say enough about the wickedness of the tribe of Ephraim. Verse 7. When they told it to Jotam, he went and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim. Now that's the Mount of Blessing, right? And lifted up his voice, cried out and said to them, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. So here we have the son of Gideon that has escaped that ancient type and shadow of the Antichrist. Now he's come to the fore. His name is Jotam, which means Yahweh is perfect. Abimelech has killed all the other brothers, and I think he probably miscounted because, one of them escaped. And Gideon named one son saying that he, Gideon, was king of Israel. My father is king, that's in English. And another son, Gideon, named Yahweh is perfect. This is mixed worship of Yahweh. Gideon was double-minded, and a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, according to James 1:8. So Jotam must have been hiding in the vicinity of Gerizim, the Mount of Blessing, and it was from there that he addressed the situation of Abimelech getting himself set up as a king in Israel. And and it is because of Jotam that we will now have the first parables of olive and fig trees and grapevines, which Yeshua would later use in his parables. These references are testimony to Jotam's righteousness, his righteous relationship with Yahweh, for he understood the things of Yahweh and spoke in parables, and ones that could not be understood even by idolatrous, mixed worshiping Israelites like these. So, and I said it could not be understood. These references would have been plainly understood. I'm sorry, I need to take out that word not. So they would have been plainly understood. And let's see what they are, so you'll know why they would have understood them. I mean, these people understood olive trees, fig trees, and the vine, even 200 years into the Judges period. Judges 9:8. The trees set out to anoint a king over them. They said to the olive tree, reign over us. This is the first time that humans are symbolized as trees in Scripture. Israelite people are symbolized as many different kinds of trees, but these are the important ones: olive, fig, and vine. The trees asking the olive, fig, and vine to rule over them, we will find out, are cedars of Lebanon, which in those days symbolized people of nobility. So, you go to the rulers of the city, you go to the nobility, and they call, the cedars of Lebanon call for the olive, the fig, and the vine to rule over them. But the olive tree said to them, should I stop producing my oil with which they honor God and man by me, and go to wave back and forth over the trees? So the olive represents the connection between the branches and the trunk or root, the tribes and Yahweh. And the olive oil is Yahweh's Holy Spirit by which he rules over Israel. Verse 10, the trees, that's the cedars of Lebanon, said to the fig tree, come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, should I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go to wave back and forth over the trees? The fig represents what the nations can see of Israel's relationship with Yahweh, its fruit, and the sweetness of its fruit, and how good it is to be an Israelite when you're doing what Yahweh says. The nations cannot understand or experience Israel's olive tree relationship with Yahweh because the very nature of the olive tree is that Yahweh is the root and the branches are the tribes whose individuals have personal relationships with Yahweh and are indwelt by his Spirit, symbolized by the oil. And the oil comes forth to help light shine into the world, but the world is dark and it can't know the light, right? We read about that in the Gospel of John, chapter 1. Only Israel can know the light. Only Israel can see the light. But the world can see the benefits of being a citizen of Israel. Israel's fruit is good and sweet, and it is good to be a true Israelite. But the caveat is that it isn't so good to be a wicked Israelite. Judges 9:12. The cedars of Lebanon trees said to the vine, Oh no. Hang on. My throat is doing it again. Closing up. I can't breathe. Sorry, everybody. My throat was closing up and I could not breathe. Okay, the trees, the cedars of Lebanon trees, said to the vine, "Come and reign over us." Goodness sakes, I wish this disease would leave me. I pray for it. The vine said to them, "Should I leave my new vine, which cheers God and man, my new wine, rather, which cheers God and man, and go to wave back and forth over the trees?" So the wine represents the shed blood of God and King for his people. Was Abimelech going to shed his blood for Israel? Not likely. Wine was present as the oblation for the sacrifices. It was what was poured out as part of the sacrifice, which represents Yeshua's blood pouring out for his people. And it was this oblation which cheered God and man once God accepted the offering. This is not talking about people drinking the wine and getting giddy or drunk and God being happy about that. No. This was how happy you were when Yahweh accepted your offering once the wine oblation, the blood of God, was poured out. And then we keep reading this phrase, "and go to wave back and forth over the trees." This is a reference to the wave offerings performed at Shiloh by the authorized and legitimate priesthood of Yahweh for all Israel. We often underestimate the importance of wave offerings, but Yotam knew the importance of wave offerings before Yahweh. Was Abimelech going to do wave offerings for Israel? Not likely. Then all the trees, the cedars of Lebanon trees, said to the bramble, "Come and reign over us." The bramble, that's Abimelech, said to the trees, the cedars of Lebanon trees, "If in truth you anoint me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. And if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon." So, apparently, in him going to the elders of Shechem, he had made a threat. "I'm going to be king over you, or I'm going to kill you." And by the way, can you see a 30-foot tall cedar of Lebanon tree taking refuge under a 5 or 6 foot tall bramble bush? Really? In other words, Yotam was saying that the idea of Abimelech ruling over Shechem might not have been so easily accepted, and that Abimelech must have had to resort to threats to destroy Shechem. So this city had once had all of its men killed by 2 Israelites, Simeon and Levi, in one day, remember? So there was already this scar in the history of Shechem. So Shechem could be overcome, right? With none of the honorable trees, the olive, fig, and vine, willing to remove Yahweh from being king of Israel, the trees, the cedars of Lebanon trees, nobility, had taken the bramble bush, the lowliest of all trees. Bramble bushes represent the wicked one, Satan, and his demonic hordes. Bramble bushes may look inviting, as a better choice to being destroyed, but they are dangerous because their thorns, while not poisonous, will pierce the skin. I wrote in here, pierce the skin? Well, what do you know? Can anyone say prophecy of vaccines of the New World Order beast system? And if you won't get under the protection of or submit to the bramble bush, Abimelech, Then fire will come out and devour the cedars of Lebanon, the noble people. So I put another, Can anyone say new world order, nuclear war, or some other kind of war that devours trees? Judges 9:16. Now therefore, if you have dealt truly and righteously in that you have made Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him according to the deserving of his hands, for my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you out of the hand of Midian, and you have risen up against my father's house today and have slain his sons, 70 persons on one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother. If you then have dealt truly and righteously with Jerubbaal and with his house today, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech, and devour the men of Shechem and the house of Millo, and let fire come out from the men of Shechem and from the house of Millo, and devour Abimelech. And by the way, we're going to see that in the downfall of Abimelech, that's what happened. Yotam was prophesying the end of this situation when he said those words. Now, Yotam keeps calling Gideon by his Baal-destroying name, indicating that the root of the problem between Ephraim and Manasseh is their Baal worship. You see, Gideon did not return Israel to Baal worship. He simply gave them a different image, an ephod, which was perhaps a figure of the high priest of Israel, who knows? But by disobeying Yahweh's commandment not to make images, and him doing that to appease the Israelites who wanted images to worship, he actually escalated the worship of Baal in the land. For Gideon obeying Yahweh to deliver Israel from the Midianites, his legacy should have been one that was more honorable. But the wickedness of his son Abimelech, the son of a servant, a concubine, not a wife, has now reflected back on Gideon and has left Gideon a poor legacy. Verse 21, Yotam ran away and fled and went to Beer and lived there for fear of Abimelech his brother. Now don't think Yotam is a coward. Just like Elijah, who ran after calling Yahweh's fire down and then killing 450 priests of Baal, Yotam needed to protect himself. There's wisdom in this. It was wise for him to leave Gerizim, and not only to leave, but to do so running. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes just reading the text of what happened to Abimelech, starting at verse 22. Abimelech was prince over Israel 3 years. Now that's an interesting tribulation number, isn't it? Then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. The fire came out from the men of Shechem, like Yotam prophesied, that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal may come, and that their blood might be laid on Abimelech their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem, who strengthened his hands to kill his brothers. Yahweh will bring punishment to the man of sin, folks. Verse 25, the men of Shechem set an ambush for him on the tops of the mountains, and they robbed all who came along that way by them, and Abimelech was told about it. Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers and went over to Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their trust in him. They went out into the field, harvested the vineyards, trod the grapes, celebrated, and went into the house of their God, and ate and drank, and cursed Abimelech. Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Isn't he the son of Jerubbaal? Is it Zebul, his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? I wish that this people were under my hand. Then I would remove Abimelech. He said to Abimelech, increase your army and come out. When Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger burned. He sent messengers to Abimelech craftily, saying, behold, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem, and behold, they incite the city against you. Now therefore go up by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. It shall be that in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, you shall rise early and rush on the city. Behold, when he and the people who are with him come out against you, then may you do to them as you shall find occasion. Abimelech rose up, and all the people who were with him by night, and they laid wait against Shechem in 4 companies. Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance of the gate of the city. Abimelech rose up, and the people who were with him from the ambush. When Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, behold, people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. Zebul said to him, you see the shadow of the mountains as if they were men. Gaal spoke again and said, behold, people are coming down by the middle of the land, and 1 company comes by the way of the oak of Meonanim. Then Zebul said to him, now, where is your mouth that you said, who is Abimelech that we should serve him? Isn't this the people that you have despised? Please go out now and fight with them. Gaal went out before the men of Shechem and fought with Abimelech. Abimelech chased him, and he fled before him, and many fell wounded, even to the entrance of the gate. Abimelech lived at Arumah, and Zebul drove out Gaal and his brothers, that they should not dwell in Shechem. On the next day, the people went out into the field, and they told Abimelech. He took the people and divided them into 3 companies, and laid wait in the field, and he looked, and behold, the people came out of the city. So he rose up against them and struck them. Abimelech and the companies that were with him rushed forward and stood in the entrance of the gate of the city, and the 2 companies rushed on all who were in the field, and struck them. Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he took the city and killed the people in it. He beat down the city and sowed it with salt. Are you beginning to see tribulation brought on by the Antichrist with this? And by the way, those 3 companies, don't you see the 3 religions that are in the world now? When all the men of the tower of Shechem heard of it, they entered into the stronghold of the house of El-Berit. Abimelech was told that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. Abimelech went up to Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him, and Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a bough from the trees, and took it up and laid it on his shoulder. Then he said to the people who were with him, what you have seen me do, make haste and do as I have done. All the people likewise each cut down his bough, and followed Abimelech, and put them at the base of the stronghold, and set the stronghold on fire on them. And so that all the people of the tower of Shechem died also, about 1,000 men and women. Then Abimelech went to Tebez, and encamped against Tebez, and took it. But there was a strong tower within the city, and all the men and women of the city fled there, and shut themselves in, and went up to the roof of the tower. Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it, and came near to the door of the tower to burn it with fire. You see, the Antichrist isn't going to care who you are. He's coming after you. A certain woman cast an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and broke his skull. You know, that millstone reminds me of the stone that Yeshua will throw to the earth, right? Then he called hastily to the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, draw your sword and kill me, that men say not of me, a woman killed him. his young men thrust him through, and he died. When the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they each departed to his place. Thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he did to his father, in killing his 70 brothers, and God repaid all the wickedness of the men of Shechem on their heads, and the curse of Jotam, the son of Jerubbaal, came on them. So Jotam's prophecy, the curse that he prophesied, makes Jotam a prophet, a true prophet. The man of sin will kill his brothers without remorse, but he will come to his own bitter end. So here's the shame of Gideon. No father is ultimately responsible for his son's sins. You know, Isaac had 2 sons. One was wicked, the other righteous. And this was so within Rivka's womb. Yet we know that fathers influence their sons by what they teach them. It is, as Proverbs says, to teach them what they should know when they are young, and so that they will do the right things when they are old. Proverbs 22:6. So somewhere along the way, Abimelech did not get taught correctly. Abimelech was a product of his life as Gideon's son. And Gideon, whose beginning was good in that he obeyed Yahweh in how to deliver Israel from the Midianites, but then we witness his downslide even during the battle, when we see him trying to share Yahweh's glory in the battle shout. And afterward, he made an infernal ephod, an image intended to highlight his authority as a judge, but he also secretly acted as a king. The book of Revelation says in 22:11, "He who acts unjustly, let him act unjustly still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous, let him do righteousness still. He who is set apart, let him be set apart still." There's coming a time in our future, I hope in our future, I want to live to see Yeshua return to this earth, when Yahweh is going to say enough is enough. You won't turn from your sins, you're going to stay that way. You're going to stay unjust and filthy. And those who are righteous, he will remain righteous and set apart to Yahweh. Both Gideon and his son acted unjustly toward Yahweh, which cost 70 men their lives, plus all the lives of the men in Shechem. And that completes the teaching.